My name is Li Guanqi. I was only 6 years old, a blind boy living in Bailiang City on the Qingyun continent. I spent that freezing day curled up next to the stone lion at the back gate of the Zhao Manor. The snow fell heavily, and I shivered in my thin, tattered clothes. A black cloth was tied tightly over my eyes, hiding my sightless face, but it couldn't hide the sharp, cold biting into my skin. Suddenly, the heavy wooden gate creaked open. I heard a dull thud. Something stiff and heavy had been tossed into the snow, landing right in front of me. Zhao Qing, a servant in thick winter robes, stood there. I heard him hesitate. He dropped 4 strings of copper coins into the snow, but I heard the clink of others being tucked back into his sleeve. I scrambled to my feet, shaking the snow off my shoulders. I forced a polite, gentle smile onto my frozen face. "Is that you, Brother Qing?" I asked. "Did the manor throw out some leftovers?" I knelt down, my red, frost-bitten hands fumbling through the snow. My smile was still there until my fingers touched something cold. It wasn't food. It was a body. A person, frozen solid. My hand froze in midair. My lips began to tremble, and my whole body shook. I reached out again, my fingers shaking as I felt for the face. I touched a chin and felt a long, jagged scar. My hand recoiled like I'd been struck by lightning. I knew that scar. My uncle had given it to her 2 years ago in a drunken rage after losing at gambling. "Sister," I whispered. The smile vanished. Tears I couldn't control carved warm paths down my freezing cheeks. I didn't care about the blizzard anymore. I stripped off my only thin hemp shirt and wrapped it around her. My own body was nothing but skin and bones, covered in bruises and sores that hadn't healed, but I didn't feel the cold. I gently stroked her hair. "Maybe it's better this way," I rasped, my voice breaking. Living was just suffering. I searched the snow until I found the 4 strings of copper. Only 4. Rage flared up in my chest, hot enough to burn. My sister didn't even get to keep her dignity in death. Was the money of the dead really that easy to steal? A cold wind blew past. Zhao Qing pulled his sleeves tighter and looked at me. "Your sister had bad luck," he said. "Take the money and go. Don't freeze to death here." I reached up and tore the black cloth from my face, revealing my pale, sightless eyes. I looked toward his voice. I tried to swallow my anger, but my voice still shook. I held out my right hand. "When a servant dies unjustly, the master pays 10 strings," I said quietly. "This money is my sister's final dignity. You shouldn't have taken it." Zhao Qing's face hardened the moment I asked for the rest. The pity in his eyes was gone. "Listen, little blind brat," he spat. "Take these 4 strings, or take nothing. Now get lost." He turned to shut the gate. I was only 6 and starving, but a sudden, fierce determination took over. I lunged up the stone steps and grabbed his hand. "Give me what belongs to her," I screamed. Zhao Qing looked down at my filthy, sore-covered hand touching his clothes. He scowled, grabbed me by the hair, and threw me off the steps. I hit the frozen ground with a sickening thud. The snow was thin over the hard stone. Anyone else would have stayed down, but I didn't. "Stinking blind kid," Zhao Qing hissed. "Take the corpse and get out. If I wasn't feeling merciful, I wouldn't have given you a single coin." As he turned to leave, I crawled forward and grabbed the hem of his robe. I wouldn't let go. "Give me the money. It's her life price." He looked like he was going to kick me, but then he saw my eyes. They were bloodshot and white, staring straight at him even though I couldn't see. He shivered. He looked back at my sister. A girl worked and starved to death. And finally, he relented. He shoved the remaining coins into my hand. "Fine. Take it." "So much bad luck today," he cursed. I let go of his robe and numbly counted the coins. The gate slammed shut. From inside, I heard a young, arrogant voice asking for a servant named Xiao Qingma to feed his birds. Zhao Qing's voice changed instantly, becoming fawning and obedient. To them, my sister's death was a tiny matter. I sat on those cold stone steps for a long time, staring blankly at the sky. Finally, I stood up. I hauled my sister's stiff body onto my back. It was heavy, and my legs wobbled as I walked away, my feet crunching slowly in the snow. I didn't know that a few blocks away, an old man in a gray robe was watching me from a restaurant balcony. He had white hair and clear, sharp eyes. He held a cup of wine. but he stopped mid-sip as he watched me feel my way along the walls. To think, the old man whispered to himself, the vessel I've sought for hundreds of years is a little blind boy. Perhaps this is destiny. He stood up and called for the bill. The wind felt like knives against my skin. I had to stop and rest several times. By the time night fell, I reached a medical clinic and set the body down. The gray-robed old man was still following me, though I didn't know it. The snow seemed to move around him, never touching his clothes. The person is dead, the old man said, his voice calm. Her soul is already gone. Why bring her to a clinic? I'm getting medicine for my mother, I replied. Not for her. I came out a few minutes later with some herbs. I picked up my sister again and walked to a small shop with white funeral bells hanging at the door. When I came out, I was carrying a ceramic jar labeled with my sister's name, Litsue. I wrapped it in her favorite pink clothes. I didn't cry. I didn't show any emotion at all. On the way home, I saw 2 steamed buns dropped in the dirt. They were frozen hard as bricks, but I picked them up. For the first time that day, a genuine smile spread across my face. Behind me, the old man was baffled. He couldn't understand me. I hadn't reacted when my sister died. I hadn't reacted when I held her ashes. But I was smiling because I found 2 pieces of trash bread. His curiosity was piqued. He kept following me into the dark. Suddenly, the old man in the gray robes froze. He looked up at the winter sky, his expression calm. He let out a soft TSK. He had just destroyed a cultivation sect a few days ago, and it seemed the royal protector of the northern Liang kingdom had already tracked him down. He didn't mind. Meeting now would save everyone a lot of trouble. With a single step, the old man vanished, reappearing miles away in a lonely roadside pavilion. Inside, a man in a brocade robe was already heating wine and brewing tea, looking as if he had been waiting for hours. When the gray-robed man appeared, the royal protector hurriedly stood up and bowed deeply. He greeted the old man with pure reverence. Back in the city, I reached a crumbling courtyard in the south. The front gate was so broken it wouldn't even close. I stood there for a long time, shivering, before I took a deep breath and pushed my way inside. The room was pitch black. We didn't have a single lamp. We were so poor that the windows were full of holes, and we had no money to patch them. On the cold, earthen bed, a dark figure moved slightly. Guanxi, is that you? A weak, gentle voice drifted through the dark. It was my mother, Song Wanro. She was gaunt and her cheeks were sunken, but her eyes were full of warmth when she looked at me. She squinted in the moonlight, looking around the empty room. Where is Tsuewei? My body went stiff. I fumbled in a drawer for a candle and lit it. The flickering flame cast a shadow over the ceramic jar sitting on the table. I looked away, my throat feeling like it was full of sand. Sister is dead, I said, my voice dry. The Zhao family paid 10 strings of copper coins. I have the money. I hid it. We're going to use it to treat your illness. I pulled the steamed buns from my tunic. They were slightly soft now from my body heat. I handed them to her and started heading toward the kitchen with the herbs I'd bought. I'm going to brew your medicine, I muttered. My mother grabbed my hand and pressed the bun back into my palm. She was fighting back tears. I'm not hungry, she whispered. You eat. Her dry, matted hair covered most of her face, but I heard the sound of her tears hitting the mat. Suddenly, the front door was kicked open with a loud bang. The freezing wind rushed in, making me shiver, partly from the cold, partly from fear. It was my distant uncle, Li Dashin. He was a short, mean-looking man with a hooked nose and cruel eyes. He didn't even step all the way inside before he started screaming. Damn it, where's the money? I kept my head down, my body trembling as I clutched the herbs. I tried to stay still, but the cloth covering my eyes had slipped. Li Dashin's face darkened the moment he saw my eyes. He lunged forward and slapped me so hard I spun across the floor. I told you to cover those eyes. You're a jinx. Every time I see them, I lose money at the tables. One day, I'm going to gouge them out myself. He saw the herbs scattered on the floor and lost his mind. He kicked me repeatedly in the ribs, his voice a jagged roar. Did you spend the money on medicine? Did you? Answer me. I curled into a ball, protecting my head. I had been through this 1,000 times. Our nightmare started 3 years ago when we came to this city to seek refuge with him. I stayed on the ground, shielding the herbs with my body. My mother scrambled off the bed and tried to push him away, crying for him to stop hitting me. Lee Dashin just grabbed a wooden board and smashed it against her head. "You're a walking corpse anyway," he spat. "Why waste money on medicine? Just die already. I should have sent you to the Zhao family too. At least I would have gotten more payout when you died." Blood started trickling down my mother's forehead, but she didn't let go of me. She kept begging him to stop. I felt something warm and sticky splash onto my face. Blood. My mother's blood. Something snapped inside me. A cold, jagged rage took over. I tore myself out of her arms and lunged for the kitchen counter. My hand found the handle of the meat cleaver. "Shut up," I screamed at him. It was the first time I had ever fought back. "We are like this because you're a drunk and a gambler. My mother is dying because of you. My sister was sold because of you. You're the one who should be dead, Lee Dashin." I let out years of suppressed fury, my face contorted with hate. Lee Dashin reeked of alcohol. His eyes turned murderous. "If I hadn't given you scraps, you'd have starved outside the city gates years ago. Now you're pulling a knife on me." He looked around for a weapon. I listened to his movements. My hearing was sharp. As he lunged, I felt the air shift. He grabbed a jar from the table and swung it at my head. I ducked, my body moving with a speed I didn't know I had. The jar missed me and shattered against the floor. Asterisk clink. 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 Asterisk. The sound of copper coins hitting the floor filled the room. I froze. I knew that sound. And I knew what was in that jar. My sister's ashes were scattered across the dirt, mixed with the money. Lee Dashin laughed, a high, crazed sound. 10 strings. Ha ha. I can win it all back now. I'll win everything back. I stood there, my hands numb. Memories flashed through my mind like a nightmare. I couldn't remember ever having a full stomach. I didn't know who my father was. He had died in the famine long ago. Since we moved in with this uncle, life had been hell. He took every cent we had for booze and gambling. Our rice jar was always empty. When my mother first got sick, he took the medicine money to the gambling den, claiming he'd win enough to buy us a better life. He never did. He sold my sister. He turned me into a beggar. And today, I had found 2 frozen buns and thought it was a lucky day. I looked at the mess on the floor. My sister's remains were being trampled by a man who didn't even care she was gone. I looked at the cleaver in my hand. At that moment, I didn't want to be a beggar anymore. I wished I was one of those immortals from the legends, the ones who could fly and kill with a thought. Maybe then, the world would finally stop hurting us. "She's dead anyway," Lee Dashin muttered, reaching for the coins. "Why bother keeping ashes?" I slowly raised the cleaver. My mother, Song Wanrong, looked at me. I saw a flicker of pity in her eyes, but she didn't stop me. She had given up on Lee Dashin a long time ago. She knew she was dying, and she knew that once she was gone, Lee Dashin would sell me just like he sold my sister. Maybe it was better this way. I lunged. The sharp blade sank into his neck. I felt a splash of warm liquid hit my face. Thud. Lee Dashin collapsed into a pool of blood, his eyes wide with disbelief. My strength vanished instantly. My legs turned to jelly, and I slumped to the floor, gasping for air. My mother's face grew paler by the second. She looked dizzy, her body turning cold as her life ebbed away. Despite the pain, she forced a faint, trembling smile. "Guanxi," she whispered. "Come here." I crawled to her side, shaking uncontrollably, and pulled her into my arms. She didn't even glance at the man dying on the floor. She reached up and covered my eyes with her hand, gently stroking my back. "Don't be afraid, Guanxi," she murmured. "He's dead. It's better this way. Now, look at me. Let mother see you one last time." I knew what was happening. I could feel it in the way her voice trailed off. Tears poured down my face, and I started to sob. "Mom, are you leaving me too? What am I supposed to do?" Her vision was blurring. She looked out the window at the falling snow and whispered, "I was useless. I let you suffer. From now on, you have to be a strong man. Get married, have children. I'll be watching you from the sky. Live well. Go see the world. See how beautiful it is." Then, I felt her hand slide off my back. It hit the floor with a soft thud. "Mom," I screamed. I called her name again and again, but there was no answer. I sat there in the silence, cradling her body. I felt hollow. I had no mother anymore. I had no family. I didn't say a word. I just traced the lines of her face with my fingers, trying to burn her image into my memory forever. Later that night, I knocked on the door of the funeral shop again. The fat owner opened the door, looking annoyed. "You again?" he snapped. "I told you, 10 coins is a fair price. I'm not cheating you." I stood barefoot in the snow, my head bowed. My voice was a dry rasp. "My mother is dead too. Can you help me move her? I can't carry her alone." The owner froze. The anger left his face, replaced by a look of pure heartache. He pulled me inside and threw an old, padded coat over my shoulders. "Warm up first," he said, his voice cracking. "I'll get my things. You poor child, what a life. If you don't mind, stay here and help me out. I can't pay much, but I'll make sure you don't starve." I had stopped crying, but this sudden kindness broke me. I collapsed on the floor and wailed. Looking at the roaring fire in the shop, I knelt and hit my head against the ground. "Mother, I will never forget what you did for me," I whispered. "I will live. I promise." Outside in the snow, a man in gray named Su Xian watched me. He sighed, his fingers moving as if calculating my fate. "Destiny is a cruel thing," he muttered. "Even I cannot change what is written." When I finally headed back to my empty home, Su Xian was waiting at the door. I sensed him and croaked, "Who are you looking for?" With a flash of light, he produced a thick, warm cotton coat and wrapped it around me. He knelt down and took my frozen hands in his large, warm palms. Even a man who had seen 1,000 tragedies seemed moved by what I had endured this night. "Child," Su Xian said softly, "will you come with me? From today on, I will be your grandfather. We'll leave this place." My eyes were numb, but I felt the warmth of his hands. Tears fell again. Will I be able to eat my fill?" Su Xian's heart seemed to break. He pulled me into a hug. "Yes, not just full. I'll make sure you're always warm and fed." I nodded. Before we left, I buried my mother and my sister's ashes in 2 graves on the outskirts of the village. I placed a copper coin on each headstone, but I kept 1 single coin for myself. I tucked it into my shirt, a final memory of the life I was leaving behind. Time passed. We moved to a village high in the mountains called Fulong. One afternoon, I sat cross-legged in a beautiful courtyard, wearing clean white robes. The copper coin hung from a red string around my neck. Su Xian sat nearby, puffing on a pipe. He was watching me closely. "Opening the mind's eye is the hardest step," he whispered to himself. "I hope he can do it." I focused on the mantra he had taught me. I cleared my mind, letting my consciousness sink into the world around me. Suddenly, the darkness of my internal world was broken by a thick, white fog. My heart raced. For the first time in my life, I was seeing color. I pushed forward. It felt like walking through invisible walls, my blood surging through my veins. The dust on the ground around me began to vibrate. Su Xian smiled behind his cloud of smoke. "A void Dao body, opening the mind's eye in only 7 days. He's a monster." In my mind, I broke through the final barrier. Crack. A sound like shattering glass echoed in my head. My breath leveled out. I opened my eyes, and I could see. The world had no color yet, but I could see every detail of the courtyard as clearly as if I had perfect sight. I looked around, my chest heaving with excitement. This was the first time I had ever seen my grandfather. Su Xian stood up, hands behind his back. "You can see now?" I nodded frantically, my eyes brimming with tears. Even without color, it was the most beautiful thing I had ever experienced. He patted my shoulder and laughed. "Don't worry, this is just the beginning. Once you develop your divine sense, the whole world will open up to you." I could finally see the world in all its vibrant colors, but Su Xian warned me to be careful. My mind's eye was new. Using it too much would drain my spirit and energy. I nodded, soaking in his advice, and stood there for a long time just staring at my own hands and feet. I pulled the copper coin from my chest and held it in my palm. So, this was what it actually looked like. I followed my grandfather to the backyard. The familiar, pungent scent of medicinal water hit my nose. I made a face and started pulling off my shirt, assuming it was time for another soak. Su Xian gave me a mysterious smile and kept walking. He told me we weren't doing the soak today. I followed him further in and stopped dead. There was a stone pillar nearly as tall as I was. Thick hemp ropes were coiled around it. My stomach dropped. I asked him if he really expected me to carry that thing. He didn't say a word, just kept smiling. I sighed and stepped up to the pillar. I hooked the ropes over my shoulders and heaved. My muscles screamed as I lifted the massive weight off the ground. My face turned bright red. I gasped out that the thing had to weigh at least 500 pounds. Su Xian just laughed. He reminded me that I was at the peak of body refinement, so 500 pounds shouldn't be an issue. Then he dropped the bomb. From now on, I had to carry it everywhere, eating, sleeping, and trekking up and down the mountain. I asked if I had to wear it while practicing my punches, too. He confirmed it. I had to wear it even when I slept. The old man headed off to the village entrance to play chess as the sun began to set. He glanced back at me with a look that said he was doing this for my own good. The next morning, I was already gasping for air as I hauled the stone pillar back up the mountain. Smoke rose from the village chimneys. Women were opening their gates and shouting for their kids to come home for breakfast. It was the time of day when the local boys usually ran wild. Zhao Beichen was hiding in the shadows, waiting for me. I could see the resentment burning in his eyes. He hated me because Meng Wanshu, the girl he claimed was his future wife, actually tolerated my presence. To him, I was just a dead blind man who didn't deserve to be mentioned in the same breath as her. He tried to jump me many times over the years, and I'd trashed him every single time. Now that my mind's eye was open, I didn't even need to see him. His breathing was as loud as an ox in my ears. He lunged out and swung a fist at me. I simply stepped aside, letting his momentum carry him, and buried a counterpunch into his gut. He collapsed, clutching his stomach and trembling. He called me a bastard and told me to wait 2 years. I knelt down and grinned at him. I told him it didn't matter how many years passed, he'd never beat me. The other kids nearby saw me looking their way and immediately made excuses to run home for breakfast. I didn't care about Zhao Beichen. My world was getting bigger than this village. I caught a scent on the wind, stewed chicken. I leaned over a nearby fence and called out to Andy Lee. She came out of her house, smiling when she saw it was me. She asked if I'd eaten and offered me some food. Looking at her kind face, I realized for the first time what she actually looked like. I played it up, patting my stomach and complaining about my grandfather's cooking. She laughed and told me she had half a pot left. She went inside to get me a bowl to take home. A moment later, a girl in a light blue dress walked out carrying a steaming pot of chicken. It was Meng Wanshu. She was careful not to spill the broth, her eyes fixed on the pot. She grumbled, asking if I was a dog because I always showed up exactly when they had good food. I leaned on the fence and just stared at her. She was beautiful. I smiled and teased her, asking who would ever be lucky enough to marry such a virtuous woman. Her face turned bright red. She heaved the pot onto the fence and rolled her eyes at me before running back inside. She even called me a stupid blind man, forgetting for a second that I could actually see her. I laughed, but as I turned to leave, I ran right into her father. I froze, holding the pot, feeling a bit awkward. He didn't say much, just kicked me in the backside and told me to stop teasing his daughter. I grinned, nodded, and promised to bring him some wine tomorrow. I made it back to our remote courtyard and called out for my grandfather. His eyes lit up the moment he smelled the food. He dug in immediately, praising Annie Lee's cooking. I set the pot down and nearly stumbled. Su Xian scolded me, saying I was using my mind's eye too much for someone who just opened it. As punishment, he told me to practice my fist forms 100 extra times. Then he mentioned that my control was getting better. If I had hit Zhao Beichen any harder, he'd be attending a funeral tomorrow. I stayed quiet. By the time I looked down, the pot was empty. My grandfather had polished off almost everything. He told me he was heading into the mountains for a few days to find some things and ordered me to go down the mountain tomorrow to buy him more wine. I sighed and finished the last of the rice. Once the meal was over, I went to the back, stripped off my clothes, and climbed into the medicinal tub to begin my soak. The dark green medicinal liquid stung my skin like 1,000 needles. Within seconds, my body turned a violent shade of red, and fine beads of sweat broke out across my forehead. I gritted my teeth, my frame trembling as I endured the searing pain. Through the murky water, I could see the faint, mysterious patterns of ancient markings etched into my skin. I had only opened my mind's eye earlier this year. Even though I could only see the world in shades of black and white, it was the greatest gift I'd ever received. I spent every waking moment pushing my mental limits to keep it active, After a lifetime of darkness, I cherished the simple ability to distinguish day from night. I sat cross-legged in the tub, absorbing the pain of the medicinal bath while mentally planning my next move. Once the soaking was done, I moved to the courtyard. My fists whistled through the air as I finished my final set of forms. I activated my mind's eye and checked the time. It was already midnight. I frowned. My grandfather still wasn't back. I didn't worry too much, though. He often disappeared into the mountains for days at a time. I fell into bed and drifted off instantly. The next morning, the house was still empty. I decided to head down to the village to buy the wine he wanted. I hummed a little tune as I started down the trail. While the mountain paths around Fulong village were steep and treacherous, they felt like a flat highway to me. I had walked these trails so many times that I knew every pebble by heart. In fact, most of the village drunks relied on me to fetch their liquor from town. By the time the sun was high in the sky, I was approaching Chongqing town. My breathing remained steady, though a bit of sweat dampened my brow. I saw the town gates a few miles off and smiled. My pace was getting faster. With a sudden burst of energy, I shot forward like an arrow released from a bow. Chongqing was a bustling hub of about 200,000 people. The streets were packed with vendors shouting their prices, and the air was thick with the smell of street food. Nearby, a young girl in a faded blue dress was weaving through the crowds. It was Meng Wanshu, who had begged her parents for ages to let her come down to the market. She clutched her bags of rice and oil, stopping at a stall. "Uncle, how much for the rice cakes?" she asked. "1 copper for a piece, little girl," the old vendor replied. "So cheap. I'll take 4, she decided. She was already thinking about me. Knowing if my dog nose caught the scent of fresh rice cakes, I'd complain for a week if she didn't share. She took the parchment-wrapped treats, thanked the old man, and started toward the edge of town. I was still a few miles out, unaware that she was even there. Suddenly, a wave of panicked shouts erupted behind her. A young man stood in the middle of the street, dressed in a lavish white and blue silk robe. He looked like a refined scholar, holding a folding fan, but his expression was full of pure arrogance. This was Zhao Yuanlin, who looked at the commoners around him with utter disgust. At his silent command, his servants lunged forward. They flipped the old man's rice cake stall, sending the steaming treats flying into the dirt. Then, they ground them into the mud with their boots. "No, please, stop," the old man cried, kneeling in the dirt to protect his ruined livelihood. These were fresh. One of the thugs kicked him squarely in the chest, sending him sprawling. "Old man, you want to set up a stall without paying? Don't you know the Zhao family bought this entire district?" The crowd started to murmur in protest, but the servants glared them down until the street went silent. Meng Wanshu watched from the edge of the crowd, her face flushing with anger. She recognized the old man she had just bought cakes from. She wanted to step in, but she remembered what I always told her. When you're out alone, stay out of trouble. She sighed, feeling helpless, and turned to leave. That single turn caught Zhao Yuanlin's eye. He had been bored out of his mind since his father stationed him in this backwater town, but his eyes lit up when he saw her. She was 13 or 14, standing tall and graceful, with a pure, innocent beauty that was miles apart from the women he usually spent his time with. "Go-san," Zhao whispered to a shifty-looking servant. "I want that girl. Follow her." Go-san looked at Meng Wanshu's faded clothes and the groceries in her arms. She didn't come from money. A girl like that would be easy to handle. He bowed low, a greasy smile plastered on his face. "Don't you worry, young master. I'll take care of it." Zhao Yuanlin flicked a large gold nail toward him. "Do it right, and the rest is yours." Go-san's eyes gleamed as he caught the gold. Once his master walked away, he turned back to the old vendor and kicked the broken cart one last time. "Listen up. The fee is 3 strings of copper a month now. Pay up, or I'll smash this every time you show your face." The old man wiped blood from his face, trembling. "But it was only 1 string 2 days ago. How can it be so much?" Go-san picked up a muddy piece of rice cake and shoved it into the old man's mouth. "1 string? You think my brothers eat for free?" The old man choked down the filth, nodding submissively. I understand." Go-san laughed and turned to his crew. "Go find that old human trafficker, Anime. Tell her I have a job. And the rest of you, go find a way to delay that girl." He licked his lips, his thoughts turning dark. He had noticed how fresh the girl looked earlier. If Zhao Yuanlin got tired of her quickly, he knew he and his brothers might get a turn. Meng Wanshu didn't realize she was being hunted yet, but she felt a sudden chill. Everywhere she turned, someone seemed to be blocking her path. No matter which alley she took, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Panic began to crawl up her spine as she found herself being funneled toward a dark, narrow alley. Gosen looked at the elderly woman standing before him and frowned. She had a kind, gentle face and a peaceful aura that didn't fit the job at hand. He turned to the man beside him, his voice laced with doubt. "Are you sure this is Anime? She looks too damn nice. I don't see it." The old woman's voice was soft and warm as she spoke. "The young master doesn't understand. If I didn't look like this, how would anyone fall for my traps? Gaining sympathy is the most basic skill in my line of work." A cruel smile spread across Gosan's face. "Fair enough. I'll leave it to you. If the job gets done, you'll get 30 taels of silver." Auntie May's eyes flashed with greed at the mention of the money. She nodded eagerly and pulled a bundle from her back. Right there in the alley, she pulled out a set of filthy, tattered clothes and swapped them for her clean ones. She messed up her neatly styled hair, rubbed her hands in the dirt until it caked under her fingernails, and smeared grime across her face. Gosen watched in awe. The transformation was total. Moments ago, she looked like the matriarch of a wealthy family. Now, she looked like a grandmother who had lost everything in a famine. Even a thug like Gosan, who dealt with the dregs of society every day, had to give her a thumbs up. I arrived in town a short while later and headed straight for the wine shop, my mind on the errands I needed to run. The shopkeeper, a slightly chubby man named Zhao, saw me coming and greeted me with genuine warmth. "Little blind, it's been a while since you've graced us with your presence," he called out. I laughed, leaning against the counter. "Business must be good, old Zhao. You've put on some weight since I last saw you." He didn't take offense. In fact, he considered me a bit of a lucky charm. Ever since I started buying wine here, his shop had grown bigger and more popular. We'd become quite friendly over the years. "The usual?" he asked, reaching for a bowl of melon seeds to share. I thought of my promise to Uncle Meng. 4 jars of osmanthus wine today." Zhao nodded and shouted to his workers. 4 jars for an old customer." I couldn't help but tease him. "An old customer, huh? Is that a code to tell your boys not to water it down?" He jumped, waving his hands frantically. "Don't say such things. My business is built on honesty. It was just a greeting." As I waited, I leaned on the counter and cracked melon seeds, chatting idly with him. But then, through a gap in the passing crowd, I spotted an old man across the street. He was on his knees, trembling as he tried to clean up a wrecked stall. My brow furrowed. I recognized him. "Old Zhao." I whispered. "What happened to old man Xiao? Why is his stall smashed?" Zhao sighed, his face darkening. He had seen the whole thing from his shop's elevated entrance. "Don't even get me started. A family named Zhao, no relation to me, thank God, bought up these 3 streets recently. The first thing they did was double the rent. We're all thinking about moving out. We can't afford to stay." I narrowed my eyes. The Zhao family? I listened as Zhao told me about the earlier confrontation and the arrogance of the young master. It left a bad taste in my mouth. They're that bold? Aren't they afraid everyone will just leave? "Who knows?" Zhao muttered, tucking his hands into his sleeves. "All I know is I'm looking for a new spot. Even a smaller shop is better than being bled dry by them." Just then, a worker brought out the wine. I looked at the jars and realized they were smaller than usual. "You dog," I cursed playfully. "You didn't lower the quality, so you lowered the quantity instead?" Zhao rubbed his hands together awkwardly and pushed some of my money back across the counter. "I'm in a tight spot, kid. I had to." I took the change and shook my head. "You can't run a business like this, old Zhao. I'm going to go check on old man Xiao." As I turned to leave, Zhao looked genuinely guilty. He barked at his worker to swap the jars for the proper size, but the worker hesitated. "Boss," the worker whispered, "I think that girl in the blue dress who was watching the fight earlier, she's in real trouble." "Shut it," Zhao hissed, looking around nervously. He was willing to complain to me, but he wasn't brave enough to cross the Zhao family. I froze. I slowly turned back to the shop worker, my heart skipping a beat. "What girl in a blue dress? What happened?" Zhao saw the look on my face and stepped outside, pulling me into a quiet corner. He quickly explained what he'd seen. My chest tightened, and my fists clenched at my sides. It couldn't be. Wanshu never came down the mountain alone. Are you sure? I asked, my voice heavy. How tall was she? What did she look like? Zhao thought for a moment, gesturing to a spot near my ear. About this high? Very pretty. I didn't get a good look at her face before she disappeared into the crowd. He tried to reassure me. She left a while ago. She's probably halfway home by now. But the shop worker muttered under his breath, I doubt it. Go-san is a predator. If that young master wanted her, he wouldn't just let her walk away. I didn't wait for another word. I slung the wine jars over my shoulder and ran to the old vendor. Old man Xiao? It's me. The old man looked up, his eyes red and tearful. He wiped his face with his sleeve. Oh, little Lin, you see this? It's a mess. I don't have much time, I said, cutting him off. Was there a young girl here? 13 or 14. A bit shorter than me. She was wearing a dress with white flowers embroidered on the sleeves. The old man nodded slowly. Yes, I remember her. She bought 4 rice cakes. She was a sweet girl. My heart sank. It was her. Wanshu was in the middle of this nightmare, and it was my fault for letting her come. Which way did she go? I asked, grabbing his shoulders. The old man was too dazed to remember, but the shop worker pointed toward the east side of town. I nodded once and sprinted into the crowd, my mind racing with fear. Meanwhile, on the edge of town, Wanshu finally felt like she had escaped. She had ducked through enough alleys that the men following her seemed to have vanished. She looked at the darkening sky, her heart pounding. If she didn't leave now, she wouldn't make it home before dark, and her parents would be terrified. She hurried down the road, but she hadn't gone far when she saw an old woman collapsed by the wayside. The woman looked frail, her face pale, and her lips cracked from thirst. Wanshu's first instinct was to keep walking. She knew she needed to get home, but her kindness got the better of her. She slowed down, intending to check on her, but before she could speak, the old woman's withered hand shot out. She gripped the hem of Wanshu's dress with surprising strength. Please, girl. The woman wheezed, her voice trembling. Just a bite of food. The old woman reached into her tattered clothes and pulled out a jade bracelet wrapped in a dirty rag. She held it out toward Wanshu, her eyes filling with tears. She looked utterly pathetic. This is mine, girl, she whimpered. Just give me something to eat, and it's yours. Wanshu couldn't stand to see someone starving. She handed over the entire package of rice cakes. The old woman's grip was like a vice. Wanshu knew she wouldn't be able to leave unless she gave in. Here, take it, Wanshu said. Now please let go. The old woman snatched the cakes and began wolfing them down, but she didn't release her hold. Wanshu started to panic, tugging at her dress. I gave you the food. Let go of me. Instead of letting go, the old woman grabbed Wanshu's hand and forced the jade bracelet onto her wrist. I don't want it. Take it back. Wanshu cried out, but a strange golden glint flashed in the old woman's eyes. She spat out a mouthful of rice cake and smirked. Keep it, girl. Right then, a lazy, mocking voice drifted out from the dark alley nearby. Mother? Where are you? That bracelet is supposed to be for my future wife. Wanshu's face went pale. She realized instantly that this was a setup. She dropped her things and tried to yank the bracelet off, rubbing her skin raw until her wrist was bright red. But it was too late. 5 figures stepped out from the shadows. Leading them was the greasy-faced servant, Go-san. Is this the daughter-in-law you found for me? Go-san asked, his eyes roaming over Wanshu with a disgusting leer. Wanshu backed away, her eyes wide with terror, but the other thugs had already moved to block her escape. I'm not your daughter-in-law, she shouted. Stop lying. Go-san tucked his hands into his sleeves and walked toward her, smiling. Oh, then why are you wearing our family heirloom? His gaze lingered on her chest, his eyes full of filth. Wanshu felt sick. She looked around at the neighbors peeking out from their houses, but no one moved. No one said a word. The old woman, Auntie May, turned to the crowd and put on her act. This girl agreed to the marriage. She took the heirloom with her own hands. Now she's trying to back out. The crowd started whispering. Young girls these days. How can she take the gift and then regret it? One man muttered. That bracelet looks expensive, another added. A few people knew Go-san was an orphan and didn't have a mother, but most were fooled by the old woman's performance. Auntie May kept her head down, hiding a sly grin. She was already thinking about how she'd spend her reward money. Wanshu's eyes turned fierce. She realized she was trapped. She raised her arm and slammed the jade bracelet down onto a jagged stone on the ground. Gosan's heart skipped a beat. That bracelet belonged to young Master Zhao. It was worth a fortune. Stop! Don't you dare! Wanshu didn't listen. Crack! The jade shattered into pieces. A sharp shard sliced deep into her wrist, and blood began to pour down her hand. She stood there, chest heaving, her eyes burning with defiance. Gosan's face turned dark. He stepped forward and delivered a brutal slap to her face. The sound echoed through the alley. Wanshu collapsed onto the cold stone floor, her palms scraped and her cheeks swelling with a bright red handprint. The crowd went silent. Seeing Gosan's violence, the neighbors backed away even further. Wanshu looked up, her mouth opening to scream for help, but no sound came out. The onlookers wouldn't even meet her eyes. Gosan knelt beside her, staring at her tear-filled eyes. Since you broke the bracelet, you owe us 300 silver taels. Either pay up or come back and marry me. Despite the throbbing pain in her face and the blood dripping from her wrist, Wanshu's inner strength didn't break. She bared her teeth. Marry you? I'd rather bash my head against a wall and die than go anywhere with you. Gosan let out a cold laugh. A feisty one. Brothers, take her. As they reached for her, Wanshu grabbed a blood-stained stone from the ground and swung it with everything she had. It caught Gosan square in the face. His nose collapsed with a sickening crunch, and blood sprayed everywhere. I just gave her food, but her cries fell on deaf ears. No one dared to cross the Zhao family. They dragged her toward the center of town, her feet scraping against the dirt as she fought against their strength. Then, through the blur of her tears, she saw a familiar figure standing in the distance. The wall she had built around her emotions finally crumbled. Wanshu began to sob, her body shaking with relief and agony. I stood 10 paces away, my face deathly pale. When I saw the blood on her wrist and the bruise on her face, the blood in my veins turned to ice. My hands started to shake, and my vision went red with a murderous rage I had never felt before. Gosan noticed me and pulled his dagger. Where did this beggar come from? Get lost, kid. Don't go looking for trouble. My lips trembled. I whispered a silent apology to my grandfather. Grandpa, you can scold me later. I looked at Wanshu, forcing a gentle, warm smile onto my face. Wanshu, I said softly, close your eyes. Don't open them until I tell you to. Wanshu nodded frantically, tears streaming down her face, and squeezed her eyes shut. I slowly set the wine jar down from my shoulder. My knuckles popped as I clenched my fists. I wasn't just a boy from a village anymore. I was a storm. The killing intent in my heart was a wildfire I could no longer control. Seeing the bruises on Wanshu's skin broke something inside me. In Fulong Village, people were harsh, but they were my people. Wanshu scolded me every day, yet she always saved the best food for me. She was my family. Gosan looked at me with a face full of malice. He didn't see a threat. He saw a punching bag. Cripple him, he barked, waving his hand. He was still frustrated from the pain of his own injuries and wanted someone to bleed for it. 3 men charged at me at once. But before they could reach me, a heavy thud echoed through the alley. I lunged forward. The blue stone tile beneath my feet shattered under the force of my kick. Gosan's eyes narrowed. He realized too late that I wasn't just some village boy. I was a cultivator. But realization didn't save him. 10 paces felt like an inch. I was a blur. I dropped low, dodging Gosan's dagger, and drove my fist upward like a sledgehammer. It connected squarely with his jaw. The sound of bone splintering was sickeningly clear in the quiet alley. The force of the blow sent him airborne, his jaw reduced to fragments. Before he could even fall, my left hand shot out like a strike of lightning. I crushed the bones in his right hand, snatched his dagger, and buried it in his chest multiple times. Hot, thick blood sprayed across my face. I didn't blink. I didn't feel a flicker of hesitation. The moment I moved, I had already decided they were dead. Gosan's pupils shrunk to pinpricks, shaking with the terror of a man watching his life leak out onto the dirt. He couldn't believe it. None of them could. Go, one of the others screamed. I flipped the dagger into a reverse grip and vanished. I reappeared in front of the next man. He swung a desperate, terrified punch at me, screaming to bolster his courage. I didn't dodge. I met his fist with my own. His arm snapped instantly. White bone jagged out through the skin, dripping red. I stepped into his space, the dagger dancing in my hand, and drove the blade up through the bottom of his jaw. As he slumped, I leapt into the air and delivered a spinning kick to his head. I pulled the blade free and hurled it behind me without looking. The blade buried itself deep into the forehead of the third man. I landed softly and retrieved the weapon, moving toward the others holding Wanshu. In a matter of breaths, 3 men were dead. The crowd of onlookers shattered, screaming and running in every direction. I remained eerily calm. My heart wasn't racing. My hands weren't shaking. This was the result of old Kai's brutal training. He had taught me how to be a weapon, and today, I was unsheathed. Wanshu kept her eyes shut tight, just like I told her. She heard the screams and the heavy thuds of bodies hitting the ground, but she didn't move. Suddenly, the weight on her shoulders vanished. I grabbed the man holding her and tossed him like a sack of garbage. He crashed through a wooden door behind us and didn't get back up. The last man standing realized he was outmatched. He pulled a bamboo tube from his belt and ignited it. A streak of fire shot 30 feet into the sky, exploding into a bright signal flare. Fireworks. I didn't waste a second. I broke his arm with a single punch and let the cold edge of my dagger flash across his throat. Wanshu's breathing was ragged. The alley had gone deathly silent. Just as she was about to speak, I leaned in and whispered softly in her ear. "It's okay. Let's go." I placed my palm over her eyes, shielding her from the carnage I had left behind, and led her out of the town. I didn't forget the old woman who had helped them, either. She wouldn't be hurting anyone else. We hadn't been gone long when Zhao Yuanlin arrived with a small army. 20 men on horseback surrounded the scene. Zhao's face turned a bruised shade of purple as he looked at the 6 corpses littering the ground. "He killed my people and thinks he can just walk away?" Zhao hissed, his voice trembling with rage. "Hunt them down." The sound of whips cracking and hooves thundering followed us as we cleared the town gates. Once we were in the open air, I finally let go of Wanshu. She couldn't hold it in anymore. She collapsed into my arms, sobbing uncontrollably. I thought I was gone," she wailed, clutching my shirt. "How did you find me?" "Thank God you came, you little blind idiot." I was so scared. My hands felt stiff at first, but I slowly wrapped my arms around her. I patted her back gently, trying to let my warmth calm her down. "Don't be scared. I'm here now. But we can't stay. That signal flare means they're coming." Wanshu nodded, her eyes red and puffy. She tried to walk, but her legs were like jelly from the shock. Without a word, I crouched down in front of her. "Get on. I'll carry you." She blushed, her face turning a deep crimson, but she leaned forward and wrapped her arms around my neck. As she pressed against my back, my breath hitched for a second. She buried her face in my shoulder, hiding her embarrassment. Suddenly, I felt a vibration in the soles of my feet. The ground was shaking. I started to run. My mind's eye scanned the perimeter, and my heart sank. The area outside Chongqing town was nothing but flat plains for miles. There was nowhere to hide. The horses were faster. Within minutes, Zhao Yuanlin and his men were closing the gap. When they were about 100 yards away, I stopped. I couldn't outrun war horses while carrying Wanshu. I set her down gently. "Wanshu, do me a favor. Turn around and start counting. Don't stop until you hit 500. By then, I'll be back." I turned to face the dust cloud. My blood began to boil with a ferocity that made Wanshu flinch. Even with her back turned, she could feel the coldness radiating from me. I looked like a stranger to her. I gritted my teeth and closed my eyes. The killing intent I felt now was 10 times stronger than before. The young man leading the pack on the lead horse was Zhao Yuanlin. 8 years hadn't changed that arrogant sneer. This was the same monster who had treated my sister's life like it was nothing. Zhao didn't recognize me at first, but as the horses skidded to a halt, he saw my white eyes and the shape of my face. He jumped down from his horse, a cruel, excited grin spreading across his lips. "It's you? The little blind beggar." He burst into a fit of mocking laughter. "Huh, you're still alive? I figured you would have frozen to death in the snow 8 years ago." He looked me up and down with pure disdain. "Just like your sister. A piece of trash born for the gutter." Still begging for scraps, I see. I stared at him, my voice a low, rhythmic hum as I kept track for Wanshu. 17, 18. The horses around us began to whinny and kick, sensing the mountain of malice building inside me. No matter how much the riders lashed them, the animals wouldn't stay still. Wanshu was crouched on the ground behind me, covering her ears, her voice trembling as she counted. 7, 8, 9. Zhao Yuanlin ignored her counting and let his eyes wander over her body with a disgusting greed. He licked his lips and looked back at me. What is she to you anyway? I didn't hesitate. My voice was flat, devoid of any emotion but ice. She's my future wife. Before the words had even finished hanging in the air, I exploded forward. I moved so fast the ground beneath me dipped into a crater. Zhao's eyes bulged. He panicked, grabbing the reins of his horse and pulling the animal in front of him like a shield. I didn't stop. I slammed my fist into the horse's head. The hunting horse weighed over 1,000 pounds, but my punch sent it flying into the air. Its skull shattered instantly. Meat and bone turned into a bloody pulp. The impact was so violent that Zhao Yuanlin, hiding behind the animal, was thrown back 10 steps. His guards froze. This wasn't human strength. This was pure, unadulterated rage. I tilted my head, my blind eyes fixed on Zhao's terrified face. I'm poor, I said, my voice cold as a grave. But I have 10 strings of copper coins. Today, I'm using them to buy your life. Zhao panicked. He was a cultivator now, someone who had supposedly transcended the common folk, yet he couldn't even track my movements. His pride wouldn't let him run from a blind beggar. He snatched a sword from a guard's saddle and screamed, "Kill him! 100 gold bars to whoever takes his head." The guards' eyes gleamed with greed. They jumped off their horses and swarmed me. They were fast, but they weren't me. I moved through them like a ghost. One punch, one kick, that was all it took to break a man. I didn't hold back. I heard the sickening snap of a neck as I crushed a guard's throat. Within seconds, the ground was littered with screaming men. Most were dead, the rest were wishing they were. I was a god of slaughter, and nothing could stop me. Zhao Yuanlin gritted his teeth and lunged at me with his sword. He was skilled, and for a moment, the flurry of steel kept me at bay. But I was faster. I waited for the split second his blade retracted and lunged. My fist connected with his chest. 4 of his ribs snapped like dry twigs. He hit the ground hard, coughing up a mouthful of dark blood. In his desperation, his eyes darted toward Wanshu. He pulled a yellow talisman from his robe and slapped it onto his chest. It burst into flames. Suddenly, he moved like a gust of wind, shooting straight for Wanshu. My heart skipped a beat. I didn't care about the blood churning in my own chest. I pivoted instantly. I let a dagger slide into my hand and hurled it with everything I had. The blade buried itself in Zhao's shoulder. He stumbled, his speed dropping just long enough for me to throw myself in front of Wanshu. The cold steel of his sword pierced through my right shoulder. Zhao's eyes lit up with a cruel joy, but when he tried to pull the sword out, it wouldn't budge. I had grabbed the blade with my bare hand, my fingers locking around the sharp edge. Blood dripped down the steel. I stared at him, my white eyes bloodshot and filled with a killing intent so thick it made him tremble. He fumbled with a jade pendant in his hand, crushing it in fear. 10 strings, I hissed. I gathered every ounce of strength into my left fist. Boom. I punched him square in the chest. Zhao was launched backward, his chest collapsing inward. He hit the dirt, vomiting blood mixed with bits of internal organs. I turned pale, slowly pulling the sword out of my own shoulder. I began walking toward him, the blade dragging in the dirt. Behind me, Wanshu had only just reached the count of 85. "You can't kill me," Zhao whimpered, scurrying backward like a wounded dog. "I'm about to join a sect. I'm going to be an immortal. I'll give you money. Spirit stones. Just don't kill me." I reached into my robe and tossed the copper coins onto his mangled body. "Your pathetic life is only worth 10 strings. Suddenly, a golden streak of light shot up from Chongqing town, piercing the clouds. I looked up. High above, a figure in white was treading on thin air, flying toward us. My blood ran cold. A Foundation establishment cultivator. Zhao saw the light and pulled out 2 more talismans. A golden barrier shimmered into existence, encasing him like a shell. He slumped back, laughing hysterically. You can't kill me now. Next time we meet, I'll skin you alive. I took a deep breath. I could break that barrier if I had time, but a powerful cultivator was closing in. I wasn't even at the chi refining stage yet. Facing a foundation establishment master meant certain death. I snatched up my coins, grabbed Wanshu by the waist, and swung her onto a horse. She let out a small gasp as I climbed up behind her and kicked the horse into a gallop. We vanished into the plains. Behind us, the immortal landed. He looked at the dying guards and the broken Zhao Yuanlin with a frown. Save me first, Zhao screamed, clutching at the man's robes. Catch that trash later. The cultivator didn't care about the dead guards. He simply grabbed Zhao and took to the skies again. As we rode, the wind whipped past us. Wanshu leaned back into my chest. It was her first time on a horse, but she looked strangely peaceful. She stole a glance at me, her face flushing. I didn't notice. My mind was racing, fueled by the missed opportunity to end Zhao's life. But I couldn't risk Wanshu. I looked down and realized she was growing pale. Her wrist was still bleeding from the earlier struggle. The sun was setting, and the mountain path was too dangerous in the dark. I had no choice but to take her to my secret cave. Inside, the only sound was the crackling of a small fire I'd built. It was a humble place, just a straw mat and some dry wood, but it was safe. Outside, the sky opened up, and a torrential rain began to pour. I sat by the fire, watching the flames dance. My shoulder throbbed, but my mind was on Zhao. I would kill him. One day I would. Wanshu stirred, letting out a soft moan. You're awake? I asked softly. She looked at her bandaged wrist, her face turning red. The swelling on her cheek had gone down, but she looked small and fragile in the flickering light. A cold draft blew in, making her shiver. She huddled closer to me, pouting. Those bastards, she muttered under her breath. If it wasn't for them, I'd be home by now. I looked at Wanshu and let out a short laugh. Now you know the difference between a real rogue and a fake one, I teased. Her face flushed a deep crimson. She rolled her eyes at me, but her gaze was different now. I knew what she was thinking. Earlier, in the heat of the moment, I had told everyone she was my future wife. She buried her face in her knees, her cheeks burning. I couldn't tell if she was embarrassed or just overwhelmed to be alive. The cave was damp and the mountain air was biting. Wanshu was shivering uncontrollably. I reached into my bag and pulled out the jar of wine I'd bought in town. I held it out to her. Drink a little, I said softly. It'll warm you up. She took the jar, looking at me with suspicion. You're not planning to do something to me once I'm drunk, are you? I coughed twice, feeling my own face heat up. What are you thinking? I practice martial arts. My body can handle the cold. You? You'll catch a deadly fever if you don't warm your blood. She straightened her neck, acting tough. Fine, but only if you drink too. I didn't usually drink, but I didn't have much choice. We sat there, passing the jar back and forth, coughing through the sharp sting of the alcohol. Within minutes, both our faces were bright red. The wine did its work. Under the haze of the alcohol, we drifted closer. The air in the cramped cave turned heavy and thick. Our breaths mingled, hot and rhythmic. In the flickering firelight, our lips moved toward each other instinctively. While we were lost in that moment, Fulong village was in chaos. My aunt, Li Guilon, and Wanshu's father, Meng Jiangchu, were losing their minds with worry. Only my grandfather, old Su Xian, seemed unbothered. He sat there, puffing on his pipe and sipping wine. Relax, Meng, Grandpa said with a grin. The kids are just trapped by the rain. They'll be back in the morning. Meng Jiangchu looked panicked on the surface, but his voice was cold as ice when he sent a secret sound transmission to my grandfather's ears. If that brat tries anything, I'll slaughter him. And why did you stop me from stepping in earlier? Killing a foundation establishment cultivator is easier than crushing an ant. Grandpa smiled. It seemed the old man was finally losing his cool. Grandpa tapped his pipe against his boot. I'm going to play a game of chess with old Lou. Come find me in a bit. At the east end of the village stood a centuries-old locust tree. Grandpa walked toward it, carrying a small folding stool. Despite the torrential downpour, not a single drop of rain touched his robes. They stayed perfectly dry. Under the tree sat another old man, kind-faced and solitary, playing chess against himself. Just finished eating? The man asked casually. Grandpa didn't answer. He sat down, his expression fading into a cold, calm mask. "Old Lou," he said softly, "today is the last time I play a game with you." Grandpa placed a white stone on the board and looked up. "I know who Ming is. I know who the old man at the west end of the village is. But you? I've spent 8 years trying to figure you out. Who are you, really?" The old man smiled, placing a black stone next to the white one. "Me? I'm just a lonely old man. My name is Lu Tianqing." Grandpa frowned. "Lu Tianqing? Never heard of it. I guess you aren't anyone important then." In an instant, the lazy old man who begged for food in the village was gone. Grandpa's aura shifted. It was arrogant, lethal. He used his scabbard to flick the black stone, shattering it into dust. "I don't care who you are," Grandpa said, his voice like a calm sea before a storm. "And I don't care how powerful your name is. As long as I am here, you don't touch my grandson. You can't." The air hummed. A second later, the shattered black stone pulled itself back together, whole again. Lu Tianqing didn't seem threatened. "Whether I can touch him or not? Shouldn't we find out?" Grandpa scratched his head with his scabbard and stood up. "Let's do it now then. I'll be too busy tomorrow." The two of them vanished instantly. A few moments later, 2 more figures arrived at the tree. One was the skinny old man from the West End, Zhang Qishuan, puffing on his pipe. The other was Wanshu's father, Meng Jianchu. "Meng, you should look at this board," Zhang said. Meng stepped forward. His face went pale. "It looks like the old man is finally showing his cards." Suddenly, the space in front of them distorted. A rift opened, and Grandpa stepped out. His clothes were slightly torn, but his face was as calm as ever. Meng Jianchu stared at the black scabbard in Grandpa's hand, a golden light flickering in his eyes. "Where is Lu?" Meng asked. Grandpa pointed at the chessboard. "You've seen the game." Zhang Qishuan hunched his shoulders and tapped his pipe. "So what if we've seen it? What does it change?" Grandpa didn't answer. He slowly tucked the black scabbard into his waist. Suddenly, the spiritual energy of the entire world seemed to boil. It went wild. Grandpa's hand gripped an invisible hilt, and a crimson gold blade began to materialize. The pressure was immense. Zhang Qishuan felt like he was being crushed by an invisible mountain. Cold sweat poured down his face. He couldn't move a finger. As Grandpa's hand tightened on the glowing hilt, a terrifying power surged into the sky, turning the clouds into a swirling vortex of thunder and lightning. "You old fossils are so annoying," Grandpa muttered. "I try to talk nicely, but it never works. Do I really have to go to the Profound Gate prison and find you in person? Isn't it enough to have one clone here?" Zhang Qishuan collapsed to his knees. He swallowed hard, his eyes filled with pure terror. His head was pressed against the dirt by the sheer weight of Grandpa's intent. He didn't even dare to think about fighting back. "Please, have mercy," Zhang choked out. "I'll leave the Great Xia prison immediately." The glowing blade faded back into the scabbard. Grandpa's face returned to a gentle smile. "That's better. I'm a reasonable man. I prefer to win people over with virtue. I hate fighting." Meng Jianchu watched from the side, his voice trembling. "What about Lu Tianqing?" Grandpa shrugged. "I killed him. He wouldn't listen to reason." Meng stopped breathing for a second. Grandpa turned to him. "And you? You spent 15 years calculating the secrets of heaven just to wait for me here. What's your choice?" Meng's heart hammered against his ribs. He still couldn't figure out Grandpa's true identity, but he knew enough. He exhaled a long breath. "I give up. Wanshu is here. And I actually quite like that brat Lin Yuan. I won't interfere anymore. But I have to ask, what is that thing exactly?" Grandpa looked at him deeply, but said nothing. Meng sighed, realizing he wouldn't get an answer. "Fine. My family will leave this place in a day or 2. Grandpa laughed. "You're not afraid my grandson is going to run off with your daughter, are you?" Meng's mouth twitched. He didn't deny it. They'll likely never see each other again after this. Whatever happens tonight, I'll accept the loss. After they both left, Grandpa sat alone under the tree. He picked up the 2 black stones from the board. With a wave of his hand, the sky cleared and the rain stopped. It was as if the storm had never happened. "I really am a man of virtue," Grandpa muttered to himself, tucking his hands into his sleeves. "The masters of the Profound Gate and the Divine Treasure prisons, they certainly know when to back down." He looked up at the stars, his fingers moving as he calculated the future. "It's coming soon," he whispered. The rest of the path, that brat will have to walk it alone. The next morning arrived. Lin Yuan and Ming Wanshu walked back to her home, keeping a few feet of distance between us. The moment we arrived, Li Guilin started her usual nagging. Her voice died down when she saw the dark bruises on her daughter's wrists. The lost items didn't matter anymore. Her heart broke for her child. Meng Jiangchu sat on the threshold, sipping the wine I had brought back. He took a long drink and frowned. It tasted wrong. He set the cup down a bit too hard, spilling some. Li Guilin slapped his back, calling him a wasteful man for spilling good wine. He just grunted and said the wine tasted terrible. Wanshu stayed quiet, her face flushed red. She knew how close things had come to disaster the night before. I left them and headed home. As soon as I saw Grandpa, I decided to be honest. I didn't want to hide anything from him. Grandpa, I killed someone while I was down the mountain. Su Xian didn't look surprised. He just nodded slowly. He told me it was good to strike when I needed to. He said a man should kill if necessary, but there had to be a reason. My heart had to be clear. He warned me that if I ever became a mindless killer, he would personally destroy my cultivation. I looked him in the eye and nodded. I understood. Grandpa looked at me and told me to follow him to the backyard. He said that to walk the path of immortality, a man eventually has to walk alone. He couldn't protect me forever. If he did, I wouldn't be worthy of being his grandson. In the backyard, Grandpa sat at a stone table. He had a brush ready and a jade plate filled with a thick, glowing liquid. I knew what was coming. I pulled off my shirt and turned my back to him. He told me this would be the last time. He told me to endure it. I managed a small grin and told him to go ahead. I'd been through this enough to handle it. He laughed and patted my head like he used to when I was a kid. Then his expression turned serious. His hand moved with lightning speed. He dipped the brush into the liquid and began drawing mysterious patterns across my skin. I stayed as still as a rock. Cold sweat broke out on my forehead. A low groan escaped my throat. The pain was beyond anything I had ever felt. If the medicinal baths felt like needles, this felt like my flesh was being sliced and my bones were being scraped. It was 100 times more intense. I gripped my knees, letting out low growls as I fought the urge to scream. An hour passed. Finally, Grandpa lifted the golden brush. The patterns on my back finally connected into a single, complex design. Under the moonlight, the marks glowed with an eerie, blood-red light. Grandpa looked at his work and finally smiled. He joked that I wasn't even afraid he might be trying to kill me. I took a moment to catch my breath before turning around. I told him that if he wanted me dead, he wouldn't have spent years searching the mountains for spirit herbs to save me. He could have just let me freeze to death on the streets 8 years ago. As I put my shirt back on, a heavy feeling settled in my chest. I looked at him. Grandpa, are you leaving? Will I ever see you again? Su Xian grew quiet. He told me that depended on how fast I could cultivate. He turned away to pack his things, and I saw his eyes go red for a second. He looked up at the sky to hide his face. When he turned back toward me, his hand moved. Something appeared in his palm, flickering with a strange light. It was an object meant just for me.